Hello, we're back. I'm back actually, not we, just me. We're going to talk today about the Google Forms a little bit, and we're going to talk about the fact that a lot of times when you select Google Forms, obviously the data is flowing in, and it just keeps accumulating and accumulating and accumulating, and it creates a little bit of a problem in terms of management of that data. And so, on one hand, you want to get as much information as possible. And the problem with that approach is that even though you're getting all the information, it kind of piles up, and next thing you know, you're looking at this huge expanse of data, which makes it a little bit difficult to deal with afterwards. We're going to just touch on several different things today, so kind of bear with me, and if you want to follow along, we're going to do this in real time. So you can actually follow along exactly with what I'm doing. And also, if you cannot, then you can always do so later and stop the video and start again, that kind of deal. So the idea is just to kind of give you a little bit of a introduction, if you will, for those who don't know how to program, how you can use something like Google Apps Script to do some things with your data in a fairly minimal way. It doesn't require a tremendous amount of programming. Just like anything else, if you don't know it, you don't know it, so you need to learn. But this is not something that's monumental, or I wouldn't say it's trivial, but at the same time, it's not that incredible to learn how to do it. So we'll do a simple, small example, kind of walk you step by step from beginning to end, actually, so you can kind of see the whole thing. I just thought it would be useful and helpful for many business people who haven't done this kind of stuff, and potentially they can start doing some things that would be of use. And so Google Forms, as you know, is a fairly simple application to learn, and it comes free with Google Apps. And it allows you to set up any kind of data gathering environment where you set up fields that you want. Like, for example, you got a name field and maybe a phone number and anything else you want to get from people. And then when people fill out that form, once you get it put together, then the information is stored in a Google spreadsheet. So you don't have to do anything special or anything difficult at all. You just simply set up a form, and then you give people the link, and that form can easily be embedded into emails, actually embedded into it, not just linked from an email, but embedded into it. And also it can be embedded into a Google Plus post, and you can have it on tablets, you can have it on phones. In other words, it's a very flexible, capable, multi-platform, cross-platform, I should say, multi-browser tool that allows you to set up something attractive looking, and then be able to have your users or your vendors or your partners or whoever it might be, your students, get the information back to you, and then it stores information in a Google spreadsheet. Typically, in the old days, actually even today too, it's not just the old days, when people would enter data, the data would be stored in a database. And database is something that's considered to be, kind of one of these things you don't know how to do anything with it. You get a DBA, as they call it, which is database administrator, who handles data with databases and manages it and sets them up. And so it's a completely different world, complicated, difficult, and so on and so forth for most people. So they don't even get into the details. They just hire people to do it. But with Google Forms, it makes it easy, because the information, you don't need to deal with a database or learn what databases are all about. You just simply, information gets stored in a Google spreadsheet. And most people know, spreadsheets are pretty easy to both use and to get into, so it makes it much more accessible to most people. But the challenge, like I mentioned, is the fact that there's a tremendous amount of data. So this is what we're going to cover today a little bit, and I'll introduce you a little bit to the concept of programming in real time, so you can kind of see how it works together. So without talking too much here, let's go ahead and show you the actual screen. So I'm sitting here on my Google Drive, and the first thing we'll do is we'll set up a small form, okay? And so to set up a small form, I'm just gonna go ahead and jump into my forms folder. I have all my forms in a folder called forms. The reason for that is because as you set up multiple things, as you can see when on my end, there's a tremendous number of folders you end up getting, And so if you have forms that are all over the place, it makes it a little bit more difficult to find them. Even though there is a faster way to find it through the search bar, still, this way it makes it a little bit more organized. So I know that when I set up new forms, I can just go to a folder called forms, and there are all my forms. So I'm going to set up a new form. And like I said, feel free to follow along with me if you'd like. I'm not going to go too fast, but just so everything keeps moving. So I'm going to click on new, and then down here where it says more, I'm going to click on Google Forms. And we'll set up a new form, which will automatically go into the folder that you're currently sitting in. In my case, it's called Forms. And we're going to call it, I don't know, feedback form. Something simple, okay? And I'm going to change its name here to call it feedback form. And I'm not going to change any of the settings here. We're just going to keep it really simple. So it's basically asking me for the, actually, this is a question title. For the question would be the person's name. And then you can put some help text if you want. But in my case, I'm just going to say it's a text field. So basically, I put in that I want the name. It's going to be a text field. And I'm going to indicate that it's required. So people have to fill it out. And then I click done. So now I have this little form. If I, at this point, just with this little bit of work, took a few seconds. If I click on View Live Form, as you can see, I will have a pretty simple but form ready to go, ready for people to put some information. I can actually type in my name in there and click Submit. And now it says your response has been recorded, submit another response. So as you can see, setting up a form in Google Apps on Google Forms is extremely painful, I would say simple. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and close this particular window here, this tab, I should say, and I'm going to add another field. Let's just add another field called status, also going to be a text field. Okay, so I'm going to call it status, and I'm going to have that field have, you know, we'll have a little piece of text, help text that will say enter P for pending, let's say D for done, and maybe, let's see, the pending, done, and X for canceled or something, I don't know. We'll just use that one character status to identify, and we'll put the different possibilities here so the person who uses the form would know what entries they should be putting in here. And so we're not gonna make it required though, just leave it as is. And so I'm just clicking done. So now I have a form with two fields in it, and we'll call it test form, put a little description here for Google Hangout folks. Okay, and then the only other thing I wanted to do was I wanted to change the look of it. And so if you look over here, it says change theme. I can change the theme to make it look a little bit nice and just, you know, plain old look. And Google gives you a bunch of different things, and you can customize it with your own logos. And, you know, that's a discussion for another Hangout, how you can do that. But for now, we'll just pick something existing that looks nice. So I'll pick something corporate looking like this. Okay, so now we've got this little deal there, and that's perfect. And so you don't have to do anything to save it. All you do is just make selections. Basically, I'm done right now. So if I go to live form, so clicking view live form, I will get this form that looks like this, and I can put in another entry. For example, put my son in there and leave the status alone, click submit. Notice that because I made the field name required, as you can see right here, it automatically shows star, and the red says required. If I actually try to submit it right now, it won't let me. You see, it says this question is a required question. So it forces me to put some kind of value in there because I set up the form in such a way. So you can totally control which fields you want to be required, which fields you want to be optional. And in my case, I have one required, one optional, and that's what I want to do. So this part is pretty straightforward, pretty simple. The problem is, like I mentioned before, is if I keep putting names in here and keep putting in entries, it's just going to let me continue putting them in and. And so eventually, you know, if you have something like a feedback form for your business where people put in their customer comments or things like that, eventually it'll get bigger and bigger and bigger, and, you know, it's going to be a ton of stuff in there. So how do we manage that? And so the first thing I wanted to show you is that how do you even look at what people put in? Because you can see right now, it just lets me put in another form, but it doesn't let me actually look at the stuff. And so the way that part works is if you go back to the form itself, so right now I'm sitting at the form, notice that over here, up at the top here, the menu, it says responses. And I have 3 responses right there. Get rid of these themes. And under responses, I have a summary of responses. So if I click on that, it'll look like this. It'll show me my 3 names I put in, and it'll show me how many entries were responded. And if I had any numeric fields, it would actually show me a graph, like a pie chart of those, which is really slick. So definitely use that. And you can also click on View All Responses, and then when you click on View All Responses, you'll get to the spreadsheet that has all the information in there. This is what I was saying earlier, that when you actually fill out forms, or people fill out your forms, the information is stored in the forms spreadsheet, which is typically called with the same name and then the word responses in the parentheses, like you see up here. Okay, so you create a form, and then it automatically creates a spreadsheet for you with the same exact name, but the word responses as part of the name in the suffix part. Okay, and it's got each form's entry is normally added as a column into the spreadsheet, and then they automatically put in a timestamp as to when this particular entry was made. So it shows the date and the time, you know, this under this timestamp. Then it shows the name, my field name, which is what I called it, and it shows the value. So there's, you know, I put in 1 name, 2nd name, 3rd name, and then of course my status field, I didn't put anything in there, so that's why it shows blank in that column. So as you can see, it's nicely stored. I didn't have to do anything for that to be here, and now I can actually look and see some things that are out there. At the same time, I'm also able to go in and I can actually change the spreadsheet, like any spreadsheet, by putting some value in it. You know, if I wanted to change this, instead of saying Ben, I could say Benjamin. If I want, now it's like you can make whatever changes you want. If the spreadsheet is set up, by default it's set up so you can change anything and everything. And you can, of course, also share the spreadsheet just like any Google Sheet with anybody, and then they are able to go in and either view it or comment on it. Or so it's just a regular Google spreadsheet. There's no different. It just happens to be populated from a Google form. Okay, but anything you can do in the spreadsheet, you can do in this one. So let's leave it as this. You know, I just made some changes and just to show you that. Another way how you can get to the spreadsheet, if I look at back to my form, under responses, there's also an option that's called right here. It's called View Responses right there. And if you click on that, also you can click on View Responses up here too. It's the same exact thing that happens. Excuse me. If you click on that, it'll take you to the same spreadsheet. And then you'll see all the same entries. You can see it automatically stores whatever changes you make. You don't need to click on save or anything like that. It just all happens in real time. Okay? So that's the basic way of both setting up a form and then being able to get to its data, being able to manipulate it. You know, pretty straightforward, pretty easy. But again, going back to the concept, okay, I have 3 records. What happens if I have 3,000 records? You know, looking at all this stuff can be daunting. You have to do a lot of scrolling, so on and so forth. And we live in the world of big data, as they call it, which is we're storing everything and anything just so we can then analyze it and manage it and manipulate it and, you know, make some business sense out of it. The old business intelligence approach to running business, which is extremely important and useful at the same time. So how do we do something about that? Well, one thing you can do is you can manipulate the spreadsheet manually by saying, I want to take this row and I want to go ahead and I want to hide the row. And now this particular record is gone. Okay. Obviously, even though you can do this, if you had thousands of records that you need to hide, it would get kind of old, if you know what I mean. So that's not any kind of scalable or plausible or usable solution. It would take forever to sit through, you know, dozens or hundreds or thousands of records and hide them all. and every time you sit down to do it, you'll have to do it. I mean, it just doesn't make any sense. So what you want to do is you want to use some kind of automation or automated tool, I should say, to accomplish the result. How do you do that? Well, you do it through using Google's language called Google Apps Script, which is basically applications scripting language that allows you to automate things and allows you to kind of glue together, if you will, multiple applications into your own custom application that does whatever you need it to do. So it's a very feature-rich language, and you can go to, if you just search on Google for Google Apps Script, it'll come up with all kinds of resources from Google itself, from other people. I mean, there's tons of stuff. But we're gonna, because it's so vast and, somewhat complex, definitely involves some serious programming, things like that. I mean, it'll take you a while to learn. So I'm gonna show you a specific small example to kind of get your feet wet so you can see it's not that scary and it's definitely usable. And so that's exactly what we're gonna do right now. So how do we do this? So to use Google Apps Script, you can go to Tools menu in the spreadsheet itself, not in the form. Be careful not to do this in the form. You have to do it in the spreadsheet because both options are available. I mean, it's available to get into this place from both the form and the spreadsheet. You want to do it from the spreadsheet, okay? And over here, you will see under the tools, there is a thing called Script Editor, which is the editor for Apps Script. And so you click on Script Editor, and at that point, you will get a dialog box like this, and you can just pick blank project to start with, even though it has some routines already written for spreadsheets and documents, forms, things like that. You want the one called blank project to start with, and later on, when you get a little bit more comfortable with this, you can certainly pick the other ones and look at the code there and then modify it. One of the nice things about doing programming, the biggest reason you want to do programming is because you make, as I always say, the stupid piece of metal and plastic actually do something useful and productive. So that's the end result is the reason you want to sit and spend sometimes countless hours programming, is because of the gratification you get from actually accomplishing, having this, inept piece of equipment actually do something intelligent. So that's the main reason why you want to get programming done. But anyway, so we'll pick the blank project. Certainly, for some people it's boring. For some people it's very satisfying. And I'm one of those people. Not the debugging part and not working on it part, but the end result part. And so as you can see, it comes up with this, when you go into this project, I mean, there's nothing there, just they have this function, which is basically a collection of code that does something. That's the easiest way to look at a function. And, it has to start with the word function, then it's got some kind of name with 2 parentheses, and it's got this opening and closing curly brackets. It's just, think of it as the syntax for it. It's the way it needs to be, okay? And so what we're gonna do is I'm gonna pull a little piece of text and we're gonna start putting something. So first thing, what we wanna do is we want to change my function to be on open. There are certain names that actually Google Apps Script uses, and that's something you need to learn. I mean, it's not obvious immediately, but as you start using it, you'll learn. And that means that what I want to do is I want to execute this code, which we're yet to write, but we're going to be writing it shortly. And I want to say that whenever a spreadsheet, this particular spreadsheet is going to be open, I want this code executed automatically. That way you don't have to, click on things or select things to make them happen, which in some cases you'd want to do. In this particular case, what we're doing is we wanted to just go ahead and execute as soon as the spreadsheet is open. And that's where you use a function called onOpen, spelled exactly like you see here. Lowercase on, capitalized O, and lowercase pen. It has to be exactly like that. Case is important, okay? And that's what it means to the actual spreadsheet, is that whenever it sees that particular function name called onOpen, it'll execute it automatically without you having to do anything. And that means not just for you when you open the spreadsheet, but for anybody you share this with. If they open that particular spreadsheet, then it's going to execute whatever code is in there. So that's the first thing we do. We've put together a kind of like a container for the code. Next thing, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to put in couple of commands here to start the whole process. And quickly I'll explain what they mean. And that's also something you can just copy exactly like I have it and put it in your own code and modify things. Once you understand what it does and how it works, then you can easily modify things to do it something maybe a little bit different than what I'm doing. But for now, just kind of follow me exactly, copy exactly what it has. And as you can see, some of these things are fairly lengthy, so it's important to both get them right and also get the upper lowercase exactly as shown. Because if you don't, it's not going to work. That's one of the things about programming that's not forgiving is, it has to be done correctly with this particular language, or it simply is not going to work. Some languages are more forgiving in terms of having uppercase, lowercase be the same thing, essentially. If you type in lowercase, it'll automatically execute it anyway, or uppercase or mixed case. In this particular language, case is important, so you need to do the up and down, upper and lower case exactly as shown. Okay? So basically what we're doing from your days in math, you probably remember you had variables. And variables is just nothing more than a place where you store some information or some value. So in our case, we got this first line saying that we have a variable, which is var for short. We're going to call it sheet, which is Google spreadsheet. And the value you put in after the equal sign. So you're saying variable, you give it a name, equals, and you at that point you give it some kind of value you're assigning to it. In our case, we have this built-in function from Google. It's called spreadsheet app.getActiveSpreadsheet. In English, it translates into let's put the value of the current spreadsheet that's currently open. Let's put it to be in this variable called sheet. So we're going to be referencing the current spreadsheet that we have open as opposed to any other spreadsheet. And if you have a question, can I open any spreadsheet? Yes. There is a different command called open spreadsheet, and you actually give it a name of the spreadsheet, and then it'll open that spreadsheet. So you don't have to always work on just the current spreadsheet, but in our case, that's what we want to do. We want to open the spreadsheet manually, and then we want to automatically execute this code. And the first thing we're saying is we're going to be referencing the current spreadsheet. That's what this first command means. The next command, just ss, which is just another variable, equals sheet.getSheets. In other words, that's the command that you use to actually read the contents. Read the contents. Actually, I don't even think we really need the. No, we do. We will need it later. Okay. Yeah. It'll reference the first sheet in the spreadsheet itself. Because remember, when we go to the spreadsheet, we obviously can have, down at the bottom here, we can have multiple sheets in a single spreadsheet. So by going here, we're saying that we're going to be referencing the 0th sheet, the very first one. So this points to the spreadsheet, this points to the actual sheet within the spreadsheet. And then the last variable we're going to use called data. And that's what we're going to assign to it. We're going to say, look at the value of sheet.getRange.getValues. In other words, in English, that translates to get me all the values for specified range, or if I don't specify, means everything in the current sheet, the current spreadsheet, which is what we're looking at. Okay, so don't pay so much attention right now to specifics of this. Just I kind of explain quickly what this is. Just stick with it, so you can see how you reference stuff. Okay. So right now we just identified the spreadsheet, the specific sheet we're going to deal with. Okay, and then we're going to go ahead and put some more code here. And so the first piece of code that we're going to put on the next line is we're going to say, let's do this loop. Now this loop says, and loop is just a way in programming languages to actually iterate a certain number of instructions, certain number of times. Okay, so in this particular case, we're saying we want to start the loop with a value of 1, and we're actually assigning it to a variable. See another var here called r, just a variable name called r to make it simple. The r will stand, in our case, will stand for the row number we're going to deal with. and we're going to say we're going to start with 1. Usually everything starts with 0 in case of this particular language and in terms of the spreadsheet. So the first row is actually references 0, but because the first row has the names of fields, as you can see right here, if I jump to the spreadsheet, you can see the very first row has field names. We're basically going to skip that. We're going to start with row number 1, which is the first row where the data starts. So we're going to keep track of it in this R field. That's our current row. And we're saying loop from 1 until data.length. And this was all of our values in the spreadsheet here. That's what data was. So in other words, we're saying a loop from beginning to end, 1 row at a time, okay? And until you get to the full, to the last row, basically. So until the row is less or equal to the maximum row. And then we're saying increase the row by 1. That's what R++ means. And then just these brackets indicate just keep looping and looping and looping until this is true. So in other words, again, in English translation is this one command says, I want to go from 1 until the last row, 1 row at a time, and I want to go ahead and do something as I'm going through this loop, going up and down, up and down, up and down. Okay? So, and you put the actual, because it's iteration, because it's loop, you put that in the curly brackets, similar to how the whole function is. Okay? And a little hint for you, if you click on any particular, next to any particular bracket, you can see it'll highlight it in a different color, and it'll find you the matching. So you can see that if I click here, next to this one, it makes this green and this green. So it shows you where the actual range is between the opening and the closing bracket. And this particular one here, it's the range between these two. So it just makes it a little bit easier to find things. Also notice that I'm indenting some things, and that's just for visibility. You don't have to indent if you don't want to, but it makes it a little bit easier to read for us humans. Okay? And so what we're going to do here is we're going to say something that looks like this. We're going to say another var, and we're going to say field equals, and we're going to put in data of R and 0. Okay? So what I'm saying in this particular command, I'm saying I'm going to assign a new variable called field, and in that variable, I'm going to place the data. This is this data here, which has everything, but I'm going to reference specific row, which is currently going to be value of the variable R here. Remember, we're going from first to last row. And also, we're going to reference, not 0, we're going to reference number 2. In fact, let's do it this way to make it even a little bit better. Let's do this. Let's call it name. And this would be 1. And let's call it status. And let's call status. Status would be 0. Sorry, status would be 2. Okay, so let's go back and see what these things mean. So we already said data is how you reference the data in a spreadsheet, okay? And that's, you're referencing this field here, okay? It could be called all if you want, but data kind of makes sense. And then you have to specify in these square brackets the R, which is the row number, and the column number. So row number is going to be whatever the current loop version iteration is. So it starts with R being 1, it'll look at row number 1. Next time around is going to be 2, row number 2, 3, and so on and so forth, right? This one represents the column, but the columns start with 0. So if we look at our spreadsheet, column number 0 is right here, which is our timestamp. Okay, so that's column number 0. Column number 1 is our name, and column number 2 is our status. Okay, so that's why in the code, you can see that I'm referencing name as being column number 1, which is right here, 0, 1. So that's 1, and then status number 2. And that's why I'm set. And even though I don't have to assign variables at first and then deal with them, it makes it much more readable when you're actually doing something later. Instead of talking about data and this and that, it's much easier to talk about status. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say something that looks like this. I'm going to do an if statement, which is just like in English. You say, if you don't have enough milk, go buy some milk in the store. So we do a lot of kind of decision making with if and then. If some condition is true, then do something. It's the same thing in programming language. So we're going to say if status, which is the field name right there, and we're going to say equals, and we're going to say D, then we're going to put two curly brackets, beginning and end, to do something if that's the case. Okay, there's something we'll do in a minute. So let's quickly go over this. What does this mean? We're just saying we want to do this action, which is between these two curly brackets on an if statement, if this condition here between the parentheses is true. And the way you do the checking for equality is you use two equal signs. The reason is because the one equal sign, as you can see in other lines, is used for assigning values. So when you check for values, you have to use two instead of one. Otherwise, it'll think you're trying to say status equals D, meaning you're assigning the value of D to the variable called status. So without getting into confusing here, if it gets into confusing, again, don't worry about it. Just remember that what we're trying to do here is we're trying to simply say that if the value of the status field, which we got from the spreadsheet from the second column of the current row, is equal to D, then we want to do something. If this condition is not true, in other words, if it's not equal to D, it'll automatically ignore all the code between this curly bracket and this curly bracket and drop down to the next line to do whatever it's going to do after that. So in our case right now, what we want to do is we want to say that if the value is D, then we want to go ahead and say, we're going to reference the current sheet. We're going to use the command called hide rows. And basically, we're going to say we want to hide row number. You have to specify the row number. In this case, our R is the tracker of the current row. Okay? So we're going to say we want to hide that particular row. The idea being that if we go into the spreadsheet and manually, or whatever method we want to use, we want to change the records that we are done with the status of D, we do not want to show them when the spreadsheet is open any longer. Think of it as being archived. It's out there, but it's not in our face. It's similar to doing an archive in Gmail, for example. So your email messages are not in the inbox, but they're still accessible. That's the same thing. So we're going to use the status of D to represent the fact that this particular record is no longer needed to be seen. Okay? That's the idea. Okay, so we got our code, we got our check to see if it's D, we got our hide rows. And again, notice it needs to be lowercase h, uppercase R here. And basically that, and if the status is not D, we don't want to do anything. So it's going to just drop back and it's going to continue to loop and until it gets all done, and then eventually it's going to just get out and be done with everything. Okay? So one more command I will show you before we actually execute this is I want to show you the logger command. The logger command allows you to easily see any kind of values of variables or specific strings that you want to show on the screen in kind of a log. Now it logs everything into this log, internal log, and then you can look at the values. So in my case, what I'm going to do is I'm going to put comments on this line so it doesn't actually hide anything. And by the way, you put the comment on the line by putting two slashes next to each other, okay? And then you can see it immediately changes the color of the line to show it's a comment. So feel free to add your own comments too, by the way. It's right now I'm not putting any comments yet, but you can definitely put comments to help yourself understand what it is that you need to do in this particular piece of code. So later on, when you look at your own code 6 months down the line, it's not going to be, oh my God, what is this? I can't believe I wrote this. I mean, it'll be much easier to digest because, code, you do tend to forget stuff and, over time, and then you have to try to re-engineer everything or reverse engineer everything to remember what you did. So if you had some comments, it's very helpful to kind of get back into it. So in our case, I'm going to, right now, eliminate hiding of rows just to check what we've done. And in the log, I just want to put in the value. So I'm going to put in, for example, something like in double quotes, meaning show me on the screen, current rows name colon, and I'm going to put in, and you put pluses to put things together inside. So I'm going to put in this plus name, which is my name field, and I'm going to say plus will be hidden, and that's going to take care of this line. And then I'm going to put I'm going to say else here, which we don't really need, but for this purpose of this demonstration, I'm going to put it in there. And on the else clause, I'm going to put in logger log. I'm going to put in current rows name colon plus name plus will not be hidden. Okay. And so that way, the idea is that if this condition is true, then I want to see in the log that the name of the person I'm going to hide, and it says it will be hidden. And then it says if that condition is not true, then what's going to happen is going to jump to where it says else, and then between these two brackets here, it's going to execute this code, which will say it will not be hidden. So either I'm going to have some stuff hidden, or I'm not going to have anything hidden. I mean, the other row is not going to be hidden. So let's go ahead and just execute this code, for example, okay? And the first time is going to say you must save it before you can run it. So I'm going to say yes, I'm going to save it. And then it says give it a project name, so I'm going to call it test project. You can call it something more meaningful, but for now this will work for me. And it says we got an error here. Okay, so where's the problem here? Let's see. And this is where it doesn't like the saving of the name for some reason. Let's try it again. Let's call it HOA test. It says we're sorry, server error occurred. Okay, so it's getting some kind of a server error, which is not a good thing. Google, come on, you can do better than this. We'll wait for a second. Let's try this. Okay, Google is having some kind of a cow right now, which is great. Exactly what I wanted to see. Let's try this again. So I'm going to go ahead and go back to the script editor. I'm going to come up with a blank project. I'm going to call it HOA test. Make sure it saves it. And there we go. And I'm going to go ahead and put my code back. Okay, yes. I had the wrong key here, so we're going to do, well, let me quickly type it in again. 1 second. I'm going to quickly put it back in. I'm going to say on open. Sorry about that. Sometimes happens. I don't know what Google's problem was, but they had a little problem. And we're going to say put that in there. I'm going to say for, I'm going to say it's a, so I'm going to say stamp. I'll just do name equals data of R and Y, and status equals data of R and 2. And we're going to put in if name equals name status equals D, then we're going to do the logger.log, and we'll say name to hide, and we're going to put in plus name. And then we're going to put else. And we're going to put in logger and then log name to view. And put that name in there. And then we need to put on the brackets in the right places here. And then steps of the full nicer like that. To the right indentation places. And again, this is nothing but readability. The indentations are something you don't have to do. And so I'm just going to, for now, I'm just going to say if status equals to D, then show is going to be hidden, else show that is going to be viewable, and to start with, let's just try that and see how it works. And I'm missing I'm missing the 4 bracket, and so the debugger tells you I'm missing the 4 bracket. Okay, so boom, 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 that's it. Okay, so we're saving the code, and everything looks okay. So let's try running it and see what happens. And it says authorization required, so click continue. So the first time you run it, it will ask you if you want to authorize it. So you want to make sure you click that you're authorizing it, you click accept. It's just something you have to do just one time. All right, then it runs the function, and it seems like it's done. Of course, it doesn't show anything. And the reason for that is because this logger stuff goes under the view menu. So you click on view, and you click on logs. Another way how you can do it is you can hit control, you hit control enter, I believe. Yeah, control enter. That's how you see it. So as you can see, if we look at the output here, it says name to view, and it's got my first record. Name to view, it's got Ben. And then name to hide is Ina, okay? So I'm hiding my sister here. And if we look at our spreadsheet, then you can see that she's got D on her record, and the other people don't. So as you can see, our code works exactly as we wanted it. It figures out, it reads the proper information in, it compares it correctly, and it makes the right choices there. So the only thing that we don't have is we need to actually hide the row when it hits the row with letter D. So we're going to put the command back to say hide rows, and notice that the script editor helps you by showing you the parameters and stuff. For now, like I said, just don't worry about it too much, just type in exactly what I have. And so I'm going to go ahead and put in this hide row command. And so now if we execute it, and it does everything correctly, see it says running function, all done. If we look at the spreadsheet, notice that actually, yes, there are no status equal that. Okay, let's go ahead and save it by clicking on the save, and let's go ahead and close the okay, sorry. Let me just go ahead and close this thing and close this. And let's go ahead and try to open the spreadsheet now. So we click on view responses. And it says it's working. And then it wound up getting rid of the row, but not the row we wanted. And so I think what we need to do here, so we go back to the code again, something not exactly right. I think I need to be doing it in the next one, so you need to do R+1 here. Okay, so let's save that, and let's try this again. So I'm going to close the form, and I'm going to go ahead and open the form. And so as you can see, it takes a little while to do all this stuff. But the idea is that once you actually open the form, then as you can see, ENI is gone. So let's go back to our script here. Script editor. And so today I didn't want to get into the minutiae, even though I got a little bit more than I wanted to do. But the idea is that you can go and with just a few commands, as you can see here, you can open a spreadsheet, reference it. You know, these three commands. You can then reference the actual individual data elements by properly referencing them by using this data variable, and then giving it the right row and column, and that will give you the ability to extract the information from the spreadsheet directly into these variables from every single row by putting it in a loop, and you're working one row at a time that way. And then whatever information whatever you want to do with that particular field, you can write additional code. You can do if commands. You can do all kinds of different things. But the idea being that once you have the information, then you can act on it, in whether it's sending email out to somebody or doing whatever you need to do. And so this hopefully give you some idea about how to get the information out that people put in through forms. And then using commands like this hide rows, you're able to hide certain rows. For example, all the rows that would have D in this case, or you can, it doesn't have to be D, it could be whatever you choose it to be. But you just make the change in the spreadsheet itself, and then you check for that, and then you use the appropriate command, and it automatically runs whenever you open the spreadsheet. It will automatically run. Notice that it's not instantaneous. I wish it worked a little faster, but Google Apps Script is a little bit on the slow side. But at the same time, it does do the job, and it has a lot of different capabilities. So I certainly recommend you take a look at it and see if you want to do something else with it. But that's how you're able to take a vast amount of information, and you can minimize what you're looking at and what you're editing by using something like this. So if you have any questions, you're welcome to contact me at your convenience. And I realize for people who've never programmed, it kind of looks initially as something, complicated, confusing, and so on and so on. And it can be. As you can see, Google showed, maybe it's a little bit bigger so you can see easier. Google, for whatever reason, came up with an error saying server, the server didn't work. And you have to obviously wait, and I wound up redoing the code again because I didn't save a copy of it, which obviously is something you could do. This is something that's atypical. I mean, we lucked out today, so it actually happened. It happens very rarely, something like that, but it could. So you want to make sure you save your data, and as you're working on stuff, you save it and make sure you have a copy of it somewhere so you don't lose any of the code. But basically everything, all the code is part of the spreadsheet now, and you can have as many of these functions as you want. And you can manipulate the data anyway. There's a way to manipulate the data so you can actually, through the programming language, you can change the data in the spreadsheet itself. So if you need to change, 1,000 values, you don't have to do it manually. If there's some kind of logic you can write to do it, you can do it directly from the app script. And you can extract the data as easily as just putting a couple of, essentially it's a single line. If I want to get any value of any variable, I can just put in a single line of this and it'll give it to me. And I can reference specific row, specific column, and the value will be in there. And then of course you do whatever you want to do with that by doing some kind of comparisons, or there's ways to email things directly out of here. So a typical example, for example, would be you have a form where people put in information, and then you want that information in a nicely formatted email to go to somebody or multiple people. Well, you can't do this the way Google Forms normally work. They let you have a link. You can have an email coming to you with a link to the record. It'll actually highlight the record in the spreadsheet and open the spreadsheet, but it's not going to be a nicely formatted thing that shows you that name equals to this and status equals to that. You can't do this with built-in functions. I mean, with built-in capabilities of what notifications Google provides here. But what you can do is you can easily use a single command. Essentially, there's a single command to email using Gmail. And so you just simply extract the fields like I showed you in this example here, and then you format your email, and then you use the Gmail command to directly email right from your app script whenever somebody submits a form and stuff like that. So it's myriad of options that you can have if you take a look at it. But today I just wanted to do the basic thing and show you how to get the data, how you can hide the data using the hide rows command, and basically get a little bit of familiarity with using Google Apps Script. Again, Oleg Moskalinsky here with PCS. If you have any questions, feel free. And then I think we'll wrap it up. Took a little longer than I wanted, but then a little hiccup there. I apologize for that. Actually, Google should apologize for that. Anyway, thank you very much. Until next time, take care.